I've got my Gearbox leak fixing kit for the Mini engine. This is to fit on the rod change that goes into the back of the gearbox. It's a well-known spot for leaking. Kit includes a special aluminium ring with an O-ring on it, a standard seal and a rubber gaiter to stop muck getting to the seal. Hopefully that will cure the problem. As can be seen by the trace of oil on the ground there, I've had a bit of a leak. So up here we have the offending seal in the rod that goes in. This gear change on the GTM has a dog leg that goes underneath the gearbox. Normally the gear change would come out this way, but as the engine's behind the driver, it has to go forward. So I shall drain the oil out and then pull the old seal out and see what's in there. I got my 15/16 socket to take the sump plug out. It's usually where I bash my arm off the sump. The usual filings on the ends. Hopefully there's no rollers or anything in there. The magnet on the end of that picks up on any metallic ferrous rubbish that's floating about the gearbox and engine. I'll get this pin out the back. It's very difficult getting my arm in there, holding the punch and hitting it. That's the coupling I've taken off. That was where the roll pin came out of. Managed to drive it through and then unbolt the drop arm. So next thing to do is to pick out that seal there. That's it. Get a torch and have a look in there, see if there's a secondary seal in there. I'm feeling there might be a second one in there. Right, I've got the existing seals out. Quite difficult getting the second seal out, it's quite deep in there. After I've washed out the bore, the next thing to do is to slide on the new aluminium seal with the O-ring and then the seal behind that. Put a bit of grease on the seal. Let's help it to slide in. That's seated right down. Grease the seal as well. See if I can get a little sleeve or a socket and push that all the way in. Just make sure it's seated square. I couldn't find a socket, but I just turned down the end of a bit of tube. See what I'm doing. That looks fine. Ouch. Let's see what I'm doing. Right, that's one in. Usual mini oil leaks, don't know where they all come from, probably some up round about the timing cover. Output shafts are another favourite. I'm just dripping this in because I've got the plug in. But hopefully that one's sealed, which is the biggest problem. Right, I took the coupling back off and fitted the protective bellows, as I forgot to put on the first time. Well, that's that bit sorted. Just having a quick look around the car, see what else needs done for the MOT. A couple of gaiters on the track rod ends are a bit perished. That inner one there is totally away, and at the front on the tie rod, the front rubber on there on the subframe is squished out, so I need to replace the rubbers on the tie rods. Could really do with harder rubbers on this, because you don't want the back end steering itself. And this is the handbrake mechanism on the rear. It's got 4-pot calipers on the front. I think they're Metro, just solid disc rather than ventilated disc ones, but they got a special handbrake caliper on them. Let's see, get some more light on that. It mounts off a special top arm that's bolted on. It's the original steering arm below it, and then there's another arm on top that picks up, and then there's pivoted on each side is a couple of arms, and in those pockets there are Citroen 2CV disc pads on either side, and then when you pull the handbrake cable it pinches these two arms together and applies the brake. Works surprisingly well. It's the best handbrake I've had on a GTM. All the other ones have had drum brakes, and you had to put considerable force on it to try and get the handbrake to work, whereas this seems to work quite nicely. Handbrake cables are routed under the gearbox and have a grease fitting about halfway along. Need to give it a wee grease. And unlike the drum brake versions, which had this handbrake cable used to come out almost vertically out the top, which meant that on suspension rebound, it could sometimes push the handbrake on because it used the outer casing as a movable part, and the inner part was fixed to the hub, which meant as the hub went up with the suspension travel, the outer could push on the lever and put the handbrake on, which is not very good. You don't want the handbrake coming on when the suspension goes over a bump. Whereas this is coming out horizontally, near horizontally, so it's not having the effect of actuating when the suspension moves, thankfully. Just looking up there, this has got adjustable high-low type suspension onto the rubber cones. That's up there, that one there. And then just lock up the steering arm with this adjustable tie rod, which, as you can see, has got a rotted boot there I need to replace. I've also got one of the rubber bobbins for the exhaust system is broken. Not that one, there's another one further over that's parted company. I've got some of them on order as well. It's quite a nice exhaust system. It's got a stainless steel system, an RC40 main box and the smaller resonator box mounted in the back. Spax adjustable shock absorbers. I have slackened them off a bit. I felt the back end was a bit stiff over the bumps. Slackened them off for a bit more comfort. That's going to be a real pain to change the oil filter that's lurking way down there. There's no access from the bottom, as there's no gap to get your hand up. But I don't think there's even a gap to get the tool up there. Might be easier to take the alternator off. Possibly get my chain wrench type tool in there to unscrew it and bring it out through the top. It's going to be tricky. I need to adjust the alternator anyway. The fan belt's slack. It screeches away when I put the headlights on. But again, it's hard to get in this gap. The easiest thing to do will be to take the boot lid off. Take this whole clamshell off to get access down there, banging my head off everything. Well, that was surprisingly easy to take that off. Just took out the 4 nuts off the arms and lifted it off. Gives me a lot better access down here now. I can at least see things. I might even be able to get an arm in there, find a few things. Yes, the gasket on the rocker cover has been leaking a wee bit, but I've, instead of the cork one, I've got a nice silicone rubber one that will go on. Somewhat worn bottom arm inner joints, inner bushes rather. And somewhat deformed front tie rod bushes. Inside one's not quite as bad, it's wallowed out a bit, but the outside one had really taken a knock. So we've got the tie rod off at the front. We've got the, I don't know where the pin's gone, there it is. That's the pin for the lower arm to the subframe. The bushes go in that part. And then this is the steering lock-up arm. The rubber dust covers had all perished on these, so I'll replace those, put some on order. Also got the oil filter off. Used my chain wrench down from the top and a couple of extensions, managed to get into that space and get it out without making a mess. I need to adjust the fan belt to the alternator. It's rather tricky to do single-handed, so I'll probably need to get a wooden wedge or something to knock in here just to tension it up while I tighten the bolts with my free hand. I'm going to replace the gasket for the rocker cover. It's been leaking slightly. I'm going to replace it with this silicone rubber version rather than the cork one. Cork one's in not bad condition, but there's been a wee bit of seepage. We'll see how that does. Now fitted window rubber on the outsides. Sort of these felt lined rubbers that glue on, so it's glued onto the fiberglass. And then it has a buffer strip on the inside as well, so the window no longer rattles in the aperture. It's an awful lot quieter, that, and I've glued the hardtop down, and it's glued and sealed across the top of the roof joint. Again, that's quietened it down immensely. And it also has a nice new MOT on it. Got the MOT yesterday. No problems at all on it. Usual advisory of wheel bearings a wee bit wobbly, but nothing that would make it fail. Oh, there was one minor problem with the earthing on the tail lights. The left hand indicator was pulsing the side light, so the earths on the bulbs are not great, so one's earthing through the other one. I need to have a look at that. But again, it was just a slight pulse, it wasn't going out or anything. The main work I did before the MOT was fixing the oil leak from the gear selector going into the gearbox, and replacing the rubber bushes with poly bushes on the lower arms on the rear suspension. I also slackened off the shock absorbers all around, the adjustable shock absorbers. They were set really hard, so it's a much smoother ride now. But it shouldn't leak as bad now that the hardtop's sealed on. I might be able to leave it out in the rain for more than 10 minutes without filling with water. I might be able to put the carpets and sound deadening back in.